Well, welcome to the first 2023 webinar in the Coffee With series, sponsored by the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership at Seton Hall University. I'm Reggie Lewis, the center's executive director, and it's great to greet you from our campus here in South Orange, New Jersey. The Coffee series provides an opportunity to showcase the inspirational stories of servant leaders and the endless ways in which individuals, organizations, and society in general can be transformed by the power of servant leadership, a philosophy in which the leader first seeks to serve. It was, after all, Dr. Martin Luther King who left us with the enduring reminder that everybody can be great because anyone can serve. And on this King holiday, as we observe and celebrate the birth of one of the nation's preeminent servant leaders, the Greenleaf Center invites you to commemorate the life of Dr. King during our day of service by finding some way, in essence, to be great by serving. On this day of observance, reflection, and service, we could not be more fortunate to have as our guest Ms. Vivian Fraser, President and CEO of the Urban League of Essex County. But first, a quick word about our sponsor. Today was made possible by the generous support of one of the center's dear trustees, Ms. Catalina Bejanaro, Assistant Vice President of HR and HR Business Partner at AT&T. She's also our newly minted board secretary. In the short time of Catalina's service as a trustee, she has truly embodied the spirit of servant leadership and what it means to shepherd stewardship as a member of the board. The Greenleaf MLK Day of Service is an idea that was literally introduced by Catalina. Thank you, Catalina, for all that you do to advance the work of the center. Let's begin with some brief introductions of our guest today. For nearly 2 decades, Vivian Cox Fraser has served as the president and CEO of the Urban League of Essex County, where she has led its growth and transition from a social services agency to a comprehensive community development corporation. Leveraging her distinguished corporate career in world-class organizations such as Prudential, Credit Suisse, and Cigna, Ms. Fraser has successfully guided the League's organizational progression, establishing the Community Employment Center, a job-creating social enterprise, affordable housing development, and strategic community organizing. These programs play a vital role in the League's mission to promote economic empowerment as a key driver for social change. Vivian is a graduate of Goucher College and Yale University, where she was a National Science Foundation Fellow while earning her master's degree in economics. Now today we have the double treat, if you will, because in addition to Vivian, I'm joined by my friend and former colleague, Mr. Darrell Jeffries, president of the Oranges and Maplewood NAACP, the oldest chapter in the state of New Jersey and the third oldest chapter of the NAACP in the nation. Darrell will co-facilitate our interview with Vivian, and you should know that among the many roles that Darrell has enjoyed over the course of his career, including serving as spokesman and public relations counsel at the East Orange General Hospital, as well as the public information officer for the city of East Orange. During his 14-year tenure at NBC News, he served as an associate producer for the Weekend Today show and NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. Educated at Rutgers University, Darrell majored in theater arts and journalism. He also studied at the Nyack College School of Business Leadership. Before we begin today's interview with Vivian, we're going to share a brief video on the dynamic work of the Urban League.
The Board of Trustees brought me in for a 3-month assignment to help shore up the financial circumstances of the Urban League. I fell in love with the organization, the work they were doing, and really the potential that we had to do more. The Urban League executes our mission through program services, bridge building, and advocacy. William Ashby founded the Urban League in 1917, and it was founded by people in this community who saw that there were a lot of migrants coming in from the South that really were not adjusted to urban living. They were rural people, sharecroppers, and when they came to cities like Newark, they needed to have assistance in getting housing, employment, education services, the things families need today. And that's the role of the Urban League. Our challenge today is that in neighborhoods, people are not prepared for the work of the future.
Newark Kids Code is a program for all youth, and it is designed to create the next generation of software engineers and to use coding more broadly to teach kids how to be computational thinkers, systematic reasoners, and problem solvers. And by investing in these kids early, we literally are creating the workforce of the future.
This was just like my last hope. I had to make sure that I provide for my son. He called me his superhero, and that made me feel like I'm capable of doing anything I set my mind to.
I was in a lot of debt. I had like 15 credit cards, and she got me on a budget. I have started to achieve my goal.
One of our most serious challenges is rebuilding neighborhoods that have suffered from disinvestment over decades.
I decided to open up this school to give people opportunities that I never had when I started out, by teaching them the trades: electric, plumbing, carpentry. We started with Urban League. They gave us an opportunity to join forces with them to recruit people and start this program.
What it does is it empowers us so that we can actually own our own neighborhood and bring empowerment back.
Our mission in the real world is really to help people climb the ladder to economic independence.
We had goals along with the Urban League. That's crime and safety, strength of the family, economic development, and the quality of life. The Urban League's been a bridge for us, showing us the way. They've been there and have our back for everything.
I enrolled my daughter Riley in the Early Head Start program, and it absolutely positively has benefited her in every way possible. For Riley, I pay about $100 a month, which is an absolute plus, because if anyone is a parent and knows the cost of daycare, it could easily run you $1,000 a month.
Urban League organization is invaluable. Plus, they've experienced serious levels of success, convening neighbors and people together to work on strategic plans, creating opportunities around urban gardens, putting people in homes, putting folks to work to build the homes that the people in the community are going to actually live in. All of those things have a deep impact on people's lives generationally. The kind of strategy that the Urban League has put together to help revitalize neighborhoods is a strategy that's working.
I am very proud of the leadership of Vivian Cox Fraser and the work of the Urban League of Essex County. Vivian's been an important voice on neighborhood revitalization.
A lot of our work started by being responsive to community needs and supporting institutions like the Urban League. And they have been a natural partner with the Prudential Foundation because our mission is to achieve economic mobility for underserved populations.
You got two groups of people who talk about it, and then you got people that put themselves in the front line to actually help their community.
Shout out to Urban League.
Thank you to the Urban League and the Early Learning Center.
The Urban League changes people's lives, period. The Board of Trustees.
What a great video on the amazing work of Vivian Fraser and all of her colleagues at the Urban League. Daryl and Vivian, are we ready to go? I should ask if you have your mugs.
Oh.
I have my mug.
All right.
My mug.
Ready for good coffee and good conversation. And I will kick us off by inviting our audience to learn about some of the early influences on Vivian Fraser. So Vivian, you grew up in Washington, D.C., beautiful city. What was that like, and what are some of your fondest memories of life in D.C.?
I think I think my life mirrors many people. You know, I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood. They're referred to now as sort of like middle neighborhoods, where my family and the neighbors, you know, they were hardworking people. They were cab drivers, bus drivers, civil servants, the tailor, you know, the nurse, and it really was an insulated. We were really insulated, and so it was a wonderful experience. I always felt protected in my community. Our life centered around family, church, school, and you know, so it was great. I never really realized, you know, the whole notion of growing up in the nation's capital. I think my neighborhood, as I said, the experience could be in any community, because really being in DC didn't really register, you know, like it does now. And certainly for other people around the country, when they think about DC, you think about the nation's capital. I really just thought about it as, you know, my family and community and growing up.
But no, I hear based on our research that we do have some photos of the young Vivian hanging around the Washington Monument.
I hope that's not true. You probably do, you know, so I had great teachers, and, you know, I was involved in a number of programs, sort of like, you know, youth senate and things like that. So, you know, we did go down to the nation's capital when I was in high school, things like that. But it wasn't something that my family did regularly. And I guess actually when I grew up, you know, things like the Monday after Easter was traditionally a time when Black families went to like the zoo and things like that, because many families had grown up as being like domestic servants, so they didn't have off on Easter. So, you know, Easter Monday was always a big thing to go to the zoo, and, you know, we did that as families.
Absolutely. And who were the heroes and leaders you looked up to during your formative years?
Well, as I said, I think for children and, you know, growing up, you know, your heroes are the people that are in close proximity to you. So certainly it was my parents, my teachers, my minister, you know, the church, people in the community. And also I benefited a lot from programs like the ones that the Urban League conducts now. My parents were both working. My father was a roofer, my mother was a nursing assistant, and they really relied on programs to keep their children engaged productively in things. So I participated in a ballet program. I participated in summer camp, dramatic arts camp, lots of camps. And so all those instructors who really showed really, you know, servant leadership at its core was about sort of sharing the knowledge that they had with the next generation and protecting us. So, and the other heroes I have were really the writers, because even in my experience of the dramatic arts program, I got to learn about artists and writers that I never really learned about in school. So, you know, folks like James Baldwin,
my favorite,
and other writers were really influential to me growing up.
Fantastic. Now, most people who have known you as long as I have are aware that you actually had a different life before the Urban League. With degrees in economics, you enjoyed a successful career in corporate America. But what was the thinking early on with respect to education and your career path?
Well, I guess I would say, like, I'm like many people in my age group, I didn't really have anyone to give me sort of career planning. My parents didn't know. They basically sort of said, go to school, do what you're supposed to do, go to college, get a job. And, you know, in their generation, the jobs really were like, if you could land a job in civil service, it was really important for Black families because they didn't have that access before. So when I started out, as I said, my background is in corporate finance. I was in New Haven, and you know, Connecticut had a lot of insurance companies, so I started applying for jobs, and you know, in the companies that were nearby, and I was fortunate to get involved in a management development program at Cigna, as you mentioned, a large insurance company. And since my background was in economics, I really gravitated towards finance. And so that's how I started in finance. And then I ended up, as you said, at a company, Credit Suisse, which was an investment banking firm. And that sort of started my career in investment banking. I went from there, I became, worked for a firm that did mergers and acquisitions in the financial services sector. And that's how I built my career. And when I got to be 40-ish or so, I started thinking like, well, what do I really want to do and what's important to me? And then I really started thinking about education and children. And I transitioned, I taught school for a period of time. I taught middle school for a period of time. And then one of my neighbors said, okay, you know, we're gonna fire the president of the league. Could you come and help? I said, okay, well, it's June, I'll come for the summer. And that was, as you said, many years ago. But, you know, as I say, God has a way of putting you in the place where you're supposed to be. And when I came to the Urban League, I just felt that we had a great potential, a great institution with history, and a great opportunity to have a greater impact.
And what's most important is that you're still smiling in your role at the Urban League. And those skills in financial management have certainly been put to use given the agenda of the league. I have one more question before I turn it over to my dear friend Daryl. And that helps to kick us off in the area of unity and healing. So just curious, when you think about both Dr. King and his contemporary at the National Urban League in the 1960s, Whitney M. Young, both men were known for fostering unity and healing, and they both were very much interested in valuing the necessity of coalitions and building bridges across racial and economic divides. How do we build on that legacy of King and Young today in light of the fact that the nation appears to be more divided now than ever?
I find that's an interesting way of looking at it, because I think of when the Urban League was founded in 1917 by William Ashby. I think of the conditions and the circumstances that existed then. And urban leagues around the country were founded as multiracial coalition. That is our history, right? And same thing for NAACP. It's because we had allies and people who understood that preserving their own rights wasn't the only thing they needed to be concerned about. As in servant leadership, they were concerned about the rights of all of us and knew that the issues that were confronting Black America were important to them as well. And I think that that's happened throughout history. And I think right now, we're in similar circumstances, because I think once the civil rights movement took place and the legislation took place, people got a little complacent. They thought, oh, we solved that problem. We don't have to worry about discrimination and racism and things like that anymore, because now we have opened up all these doors. And certainly we know that Whitney M. Young, was really instrumental in opening those doors for people for corporations and other partners to give African Americans and others access to those opportunities in corporate life. So I certainly stand on their shoulders, but I also think of that legacy, and I think of the time we're in right now. And we know that when we start to elevate the ideals of the Urban League movement and start to think about the issues of voting rights. And I think we even saw that in this last election. People realized that, what type of country do I want to live in? And they started to say, well, I may be of this political persuasion or whatever, but I'm going to vote for something greater. And I think that's what the attraction of the NAACP and the Urban League is that we've always had an open door, welcoming of people of different races and different economic status. But we also know, as we try to fight issues of poverty and discrimination, racism, structural issues, it's going to take more than us individually in our own community to solve those issues. Those are issues that we all need to care about. And that is the work of the Urban League. So we do program service, bridge building, and advocacy. And those bridges we still need to build and still need to work to advocate for.
Absolutely. Daryl will take it from here.
You're on mute. Daryl.
All
I
right.
have my coffee.
Well, certainly, this has been very stimulating discussion, enlightening discussion so far. Happy MLK Day, Vivian Cox Fraser. So good to see you.
Good to see you too.
As a colleague, and I'm happy to announce that the keynote speaker for the Oranges and Maplewood NAACP Freedom Fund Gala on April 1st, 2023, will be none other than the president of the National Urban League, Mark Morial. So we continue the linkage between the NAACP and the Urban League.
I guess I'll be there. For
I would
sure.
hope so.
I will for sure.
Yeah. So let's continue this discussion, a very enlightening discussion, by pivoting here to bridging divides, sort of continuing along that theme. The question is, in the spirit of bridging divides, one would think that we ought to be able to unite as Americans around the preservation of our democracy. The recent public discourse, particularly in Washington, would suggest we have reason for concern. How might our leaders do a better job with employing those basic servant leader principles of empathy and healing?
I think politics are, and the structure of politics are that you're basically advocating for your own self-interest, whether it's a district or a state, whether you're a congressional district or whatever. So I think our experiences across the country are vastly different, right? So what you really have to do is go, as servant leaders, think about how do you let someone else see and understand the experiences that your community is experiencing. So it's not us versus them. It's really, how do you talk more broadly about ideals and how all of those are issues and how they impact our communities across racial and economic divides, right? So I think some of the things we saw with the passage of the infrastructure bill, why did that happen? It happened because you could show each different community's interests were reflected in that legislation. And sometimes it's difficult to do that because people feel, and some politics is sort of like their voice is the loudest and their concerns are the only ones. But the only way we really can bridge it is understanding that we all share some concerns that are across divide. And I think just in the climate it is today, the only way you're going to get something done is if you start to reach across to other people so you understand the commonness of your experience. And I certainly feel, after the civil rights movement and then communities became more integrated, it's more difficult to, to align, disparage one community when you actually know people who are of that community and your kids are playing on basketball together or soccer together or different things like that. So I really just feel like promoting understanding between communities is really important. And I think we have some roadmaps for doing that. I think certainly with even healthcare. There was a big fight against Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act at the time, but so many people benefit from healthcare from across this country. Doesn't matter if you're in rural West Virginia or urban Newark. Many of the clients I had, they hadn't been to a doctor or physician for a checkup until the Affordable Care Act was passed. So I really believe that, getting people to think more, and so much of our work is local. So that's the problem, especially even for the Urban League. We're in Essex County, but I also have to speak to people in other parts of the state because the things that we need in Essex County, they also need in Cumberland County too. So, part of it is getting people to understand and being able to elevate those ideas and things that we care about in all of our communities, I think.
As a civil rights organization or advocacy organization, how can the Urban League and groups like my own, the NAACP, manage our agendas with respect to equity, social, and economic justice without alienating others?
Yeah, I think, well, that's hard sometimes. I do think, as I've sort of said in prior questions, it's about elevating the ideas and getting people to understand your shared vision for a broader New Jersey, a broader community. But I also believe it's important to say we're not afraid as organizations for standing up for those issues that we were founded to fight for, right? So equity, opportunity. You may not change everybody's mind, right? But we still have an obligation to speak loudly, certainly and forcefully at times, but also showing that we have a big tent. And I really believe like having allies is an important hallmark of the NAACP and the Urban League. So knowing when your allies are advocating for things, when you're advocating for certain things, it's important to be able to show sometime that you're getting the message delivered. But sometimes the messenger does matter. And I think that's one of the hallmarks, I would say, of urban leagues and NAACP. But I also feel that in times like this, people also need to understand that there's organizations and institutions that are here, to defend their rights, to defend their needs. And so I say I don't look for a fight, but I don't run from one. And I think that's important for organizations, even in the terms of servant leadership. I think that's important too, because we know certainly Martin Luther King fought for equal rights at great cost to himself. So it wasn't really about himself and his institution. It was really about others and the ideal. So I think that that's an important concept to keep in mind as well.
And why should the work of the Urban League and the NAACP matter, even if you are not a person of color or living in a marginalized community? Why should everyone feel like they have a stake in the quest for social change?
Well, I believe that certainly we see that now. I think as we've become a more diverse country, there's diversities in families now that wasn't there before. So, you're also thinking like my son-in-law or my nephew or my grandson, I want to create opportunities for them too. I want to make sure that the America we dream of is available to them. But beyond that, I also think that you can see the danger of extremism. I think that's one thing we saw on January 6th, that it should make you think like, we thought we were, as my husband might say, we're still in the Civil War, but it's still those issues, even though they've been buried, they're really close to the surface. So I think the whole issue around preserving democracy, it requires all of us. So what I think can bring people to the Urban League and the NAACP is one that we are ones that are open and inclusive, and we have a big tent. We have a big tent to address the issues and concerns of disparity. And certainly it can't be left to low-income communities and families who are struggling to solve these issues on their own. That's why you have institutions, and why institutions need allies is because we're addressing issues that go beyond just our ability to solve alone. So hopefully, just in terms of distributing that message, I think certainly we have the Essex 5, which is the Urban League and the NAACPs. We work together on policy issues and advocating for those things. So hopefully, collectively, we'll continue to do the great work and to continue to open the doors and have a big tent so that the diversity of our leadership team, one, it should reflect the community we serve, but you also need to have allies that help you broaden your impact. And so I think there's ways to do that.
Yes, and we're always constantly reaching out to connect the dots, to strengthen, our portfolio, so to speak, in terms of relationships with those in the community and partnership
Yes.
that help to advance the agenda for social change. And on that note, we'll pivot to another question on service. Indeed, Dr. King said it best. Everyone can be great because everyone can serve. So let's round out today's interview by talking about serving others. As you know, Dr. King preached against racism, militarism, and materialism. When thinking about that last ism, it's hard to imagine that we've made much progress in light of the realities that our society is steeped in a materialistic mindset and thrives on defining happiness as acquiring many things as possible, and thinking less about others. What are your thoughts?
I think it's about connecting people to a bigger ideal, in terms of their own self-interests of, the ideals of democracy, racial inequity, things like that are beyond just your own singular self-interest. And certainly that's a hallmark of servant leadership, is that you think about yourself last. You're not thinking about yourself first. And so I believe, that's key to what we have to do for bringing people in. And it begins with those you want to serve in mind. And I think also about education and empowering people. It's about ensuring, access to knowledge. If you limit access to information and limit access to knowledge, that's really disempowering. Because really communities know what they need. Is our jobs as institution is to be that bridge to get those things achieved, right? To be a help in it, but understanding it's not just getting things for our own organizations or our own institutions. I think one of the things that we do well with NAACP and the Urban League in terms of partners, we're not experts at everything. We have expertise in some areas, and those in the areas that it makes sense that we lead on, that's fine. But the other organizations that have expertise in other areas, and in that case, our job as servant leaders is to help them achieve what their missions are, because it makes it better for everyone. So I think there are opportunities for that, and certainly we certainly try to work on that, and we can, look for more ways to work together to advance those ideals, and also the idea of working together. And certainly, abundance means many things. So it's not just about the things. And I think certainly we saw that from COVID. The connection to community is important for people to feel like they're empowered and have power in their own communities is important. And in COVID, we saw how fractured and how tenuous some of those bonds were, right? So we certainly can think about things beyond materialism and consumerism and things like that, to things, concepts and notions of service, and of how do we build abundance for everyone. And that means issues of education and opportunity. It's not just about accessing things, but about accessing power through education and knowledge, right? So if people have access to those things, they can get other things, right? But the issue of having abundance, and I think I can just give one example of one of the projects we were working on in the neighborhood around the Urban League, which is the Fairmont community. And we were working with an urban planner. And he said, the only green space in Fairmont is a cemetery. That really was painful to hear, right? Because then you think, well, where do children play? What sort of life are we creating? What sort of community are we creating? So I think, you know, consumerism, military, you know, I think that there is issues of what makes a healthy community, what makes a healthy nation, what are the things that all children need to thrive. And that sort of like gets us back to that equity issue. So it's not about equality, it's about equity, and it's about ensuring that all children, all families, all communities have what they need to be successful, right? And to be well. And so, like I said, I think COVID showed us that. And so I think it's beyond the notion of the isms, but more the concept of a community and how do we build that.
So how do you make servant leadership attractive in light of what you just shared when thinking about our culture today? Servant leadership has been described as, in some circles, countercultural. What are your thoughts?
Well, I guess it is some way, because it's not about what individually what you're going to get. And I think you know, there's certainly a struggle with that, but you know, like the Urban League has volunteerism as core to our work. And you know, we have auxiliaries, we have a board of trustees. You make it attractive because you're addressing issues of broader concern than your own individual experience. And I think for many African Americans, I'll say, we understand whether it's 6 degrees of separation, 3 degrees of separation, we have members of our families, maybe we've been successful, but we always have cousins and uncles and family members who are struggling with some of the same issues families, African American families have been struggling with for decades. So we have a clear sense that, you know, there before the grace of God go I. Like, we've been fortunate, right? So part of it is to say, we've been fortunate, we've had opportunities, and how do we pay it forward and how do we pay it back? And so I think you can connect to people in that regard, because I really do know there are many people who care about all children having access to opportunity. And, you know, many people were horrified when they found like people were having food insecurity during the COVID, right? It was so like, oh, like, and if you think of Essex County, it's like, you know, 3 miles apart. And, you know, what's the difference in experience and what's the difference in understanding? And I think, you know, it's about being able to share those stories, share those experiences with others, not in a way that demeans the story, the person himself that's in that experience, because any one of us are in that experience, right? Can be in that experience. And certainly we know that in the African American community, some of the things we work around are the racial wealth gap and intergenerational wealth. We don't have intergenerational wealth like that. And sometimes we find young people who have great ideas. They don't have that rich uncle to give them the money to start the business and things like that. But so I think the idea of connecting people to an experience and understanding that people, some of us even have that own experience ourselves, right? So even many wealthy people, or, you know, you might live in a big house, but you know, maybe you can't make your next, after your next 2 mortgage payments, if you weren't working, you might exhaust your savings. So, you know, there are lots of circumstances where we can find commonalities. And I think that's really important as we talk about servant leadership, about giving back, to come with an idea in your mind of helping, but no judgment. It's not judging, it's really, you know, helping with a clear mind, open heart, to understand that we've had opportunities, and it's a responsibility to also make sure that those opportunities exist for others. And certainly if we think about some of the challenges to you know, affirmative action and other things. I'm an affirmative action kid. I benefited from affirmative action when they started to open up even colleges and things like that. You know, I was a smart kid, but it's harder now for young people than it was when I, got into a place like Yale. I'm just saying, my scores probably wouldn't have got me near Yale. But anyway, I digress a little bit. But I still believe, and I certainly have demonstrated I belong there, right? So I think there are many young people in our community that need that sense of belonging and have that understanding that they belong, right? And they belong there. And that's what we have to make sure that they have. So hopefully in speaking about ideas like that, connecting to people's own experience of family members, and how do you connect them with an idea that it's our responsibility. They say those who have been given much, much is expected. So I think that's the connection to the servant leadership.
Right. And the other one is heavy is the crown. So. But moving right along and on that note, when thinking.
I can't hear you, Daryl. Hey, Daryl, I can't hear you.
Daryl, we're having a sound issue, Daryl.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
We lost part of your question. Also, in the interest of getting in our audience, we'll make this our last question. Good people.
Okay.
We'll make this our last question. Okay. So can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Oh, when thinking of today, what are you most proud of with respect to the Urban League's current efforts to build on its rich history and legacy of service and expanding opportunities for low-income people of color? What are you most proud of?
Well, you said I've been at the Urban League quite a while, so I feel like we have, as an organization, we have lots to be proud of. And one thing I would say is I'm most proud that we are a responsive organization. So I feel that we have a vibrant mission, as important today as it was when we founded in 1917. And we've created an integrated service delivery model. So it's not just about people getting jobs, it's about help creating the jobs. It's not only about creating the job, but creating and building a community. So I'm really proud about the work that we've done, as I said, to educate and engage families around improving their own community. I'm proud of our work at listening and understanding what the priorities are that people communicate. I'm proud that as an institution, we use whatever institution and power and influence to advance the goals of people in the community, not necessarily goals of the Urban League. And some people might know we had a fight around a switching station that was coming in the community. It wasn't about the Urban League. It wasn't about Vivian. It was really about the people in the community and what they wanted to achieve. And it was really about educating them on all the issues. And they made decisions about what they wanted to do. And I felt in some ways as a servant leader, I'm kind of like the vessel, but I was taking my direction from others too, those that are most impacted by issues. So I think that's one thing the Urban League does really well, is listening and advancing the issues and concerns of families, and really about how do you attack that racial wealth gap? You attack it with ownership. So I tell people, own it, right? So, and my job as the Urban League is to get you in a position that the people that live right here in this community right now, as communities start to revitalize, they're the ones that benefit economically, and they're the ones that own. So when we build housing for home ownership, I build them at the prices that people in this community can afford. And how I do that, we fight for the subsidy. We get relationships with the financial institutions to bring the down payment assistance, other resources in, so that the nursing assistant and the roofer, the people in this community are just like my mom and dad, that they can own and they can create better pathways for their children, like my parents did for me.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, of course, we could listen to you and Daryl all day. We did promise the audience a few minutes for our Q&A, but I certainly want to thank you, Vivian and Daryl, for a rich and timely discussion. And we're grateful, obviously, for the work of both the Urban League and the NAACP for all the ways in which you've been creating thriving, more equitable communities, but also for all the ways in which you help us to understand the necessity of building stronger bridges and promoting more common understanding as we work to preserve our democracy. I'm going to, before I ask Priscilla to begin the Q&A piece, to ask you both to quickly let our audience know, though, how they can engage in your organizations or with your organization on our day of service.
Sure.
Go
So
ahead.
I'll go first. I think one thing I would say is like, we already struggle sometime with creating a service activity on one specific day. So what I would say, I think service can't be just one day. And certainly MLK didn't serve on one day. And on this day, it's really important to reflect on the contributions and the sacrifice and his legacy, right? But the Urban League offers several opportunities for engagement. We have our YPs, we have two auxiliaries for the Urban League. One is the YPs, that's for young people, or not young people, I say adults under the age of 40. And we have the Guild, which is for over the age of 40. And we also have our Board of Trustees. So there are many ways to engage and to share your experience and your gifts and talents as we move to advance social change and social equity. So there are many opportunities to engage in that way. And you can reach us at ulec.org or call the Urban League at 973-624-9535 or reach out on the website, sign up, and I'll definitely follow up with you.
And we'll put that website in the chat for the Q&A feed. Daryl, quickly.
Yes. Well, you know, the NAACP has been at the forefront of voting rights. Given the current state of affairs in this nation, when I took the helm in January 2020, it was actually January 15th, 2020, as president, I set a simple goal of 500 newly registered voters. And we've been working diligently to educate our electorate out there, and I'm happy to announce that since that time, we've achieved 340 plus in counting newly registered voters, and we're continuing our efforts. You can join us by our website is omnaacp.org. And we encourage you, because membership too also is the lifeblood of the NAACP. We have 20 committees that address all of the issues and all of the disparities that affect and impact our communities. And it's, for lack of a better description, it's all hands on deck time right now. We need everyone's participation, as our lives in our communities literally depend upon it. And so, you know, with the current voter suppression in more than 47 states in this country, making it more difficult to vote, voting is a sacred right. I voted since I turned 18 years old. And so we need to really kind of get our young people really involved and engaged in the NAACP and understanding the importance of voting rights.
Thank you both. Keep your cameras on and your microphones unmuted. I'm going to ask my young, distinguished colleague, Priscilla Phoebus, to now lead us through our Q&A portion of the program. Priscilla.
Thank you, Reggie. All right, so we have quite a few Q&A questions to go through. So our first one is from Brian, and his question is, servant leadership is still countercultural, as was mentioned. Are you hopeful that the next generation will be servant leaders? If so, why?
Well, I am hopeful the next generation will be servant leaders, because the young people are the ones that generally lead certain movements, right? When social change happens, it's the young that are at the forefront of it. And the goal is to engage them in mentor, like if they've had a mentor, it's a good chance they'll be a mentor. So I think our responsibility, even as we think about, you mentioned how to engage with the Urban League and become volunteers, young people need mentors. So I think if we do our job with mentoring young people, youngsters, when they're in the role to be able to give back, they'll also understand the importance of it because they've personally experienced it, which I think is also important.
Definitely. Our next question is, so for those servant leaders today who find themselves doing the lonely work of change agents, what might they take from the courageous example of King's life?
Well, I think the example you can take is it's not about you alone, right? So if Dr. King had walked across the Pettus Bridge by himself, it would have been a different result, right? So he understood the importance of coalitions and of building and mobilizing people. So I think that's important. And what you can take away from it is that, it's hard work and sometimes it's grinding, I would say. From the questioner's point of view, that it is tiring. Mm-hmm. But when you start you see the benefit of changing people's lives and the impact you're having, you can get your reward from that sometimes. And also sometimes you might get your reward in the smallest of places. It might be just a child that says, wow, I never had a new coat, so this is my first new coat, when you did a coat drive. Or the parent who says, oh, thank you for helping me get this other job because now I can afford to pay for tutoring for my child, or I can just make my bills and things like that. So I think as servant leaders, you have to look for your reward to some, I don't say reward, but the recognition from the people you're actually serving. And sometimes we're looking for recognition from, I don't know, was it in PR? Did somebody put it in the paper? Did somebody else recognize it? As servant leaders, one of the things that's not what drives us, right? So I would say, embrace those folks that you're serving, whatever your mission is, whatever the mission of your organization or what drives you to be a servant leader. Look for the rewards in terms of the impact you've had on those people.
Yes, I love that. We don't want to run over time, so this will be our last question. What do you believe was your biggest or most impactful accomplishment while practicing servant leadership?
I think in terms of servant leadership, I would say part of it is that the knowledge that I was able to receive. As I said, I've done a lot of things in finance, and financial things, using those same skills to sort of wrangle resources out of where they are and get them directed to the community and constituents I serve is just something that drives me. Because as they say, your budget shows your priorities. And our goal is always to make that budget show the community's priority. So you're all the time doing that. And I feel really proud of that. And like I said, I think in the intro, Reggie mentioned, transitioning the Urban League from social services to more community impact organization is important. Because I'll say Urban League or anything, I can do social services all day. Generally speaking, the government pays us to provide social services, but social change takes resources, and those are people power and economic power. You need those resources too for social change, and you need allies and advocates and partners like the NAACP and other organizations to come together to fight for those things. So I'm really excited for what the future holds, even in the partnership. NAACP and the Urban League, we're in this fight about segregation in the schools. Those issues are important. And so that's what I'll say I'm excited about and also proud about. And I'm also proud that whatever the next challenge that comes that faces our community, we're standing there to address it.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Vivian, for joining us today, as well as you, Daryl. And we will be sharing information for both your organizations as well as contact information as a follow-up to our attendees. But before everyone leaves, we do have a few announcements. Let me get this ready. Our next Coffee with webinar is with Mac Tristan, in which we will be discussing servant leadership and law enforcement. You can register ahead with the QR code and the link. We will also be sharing this with our follow-up email. And we also still have spots available for our Foundations of Servant Leadership course beginning next week, January 26th. And if you're interested in learning anything more about the Greenleaf Center, you can visit our website, greenleaf.org, to know more about our core programming. And we just want to remind all our attendees to please take the survey as you exit. And once again, thank you all for joining us. And thank you, Vivian, and thank you, Daryl.
Thank you.
Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day,
Happy
everyone.
MLK Day.
Happy MLK Day.
God bless you all.